Steam, video games' largest digital distribution platform, has recently been involved in a number of controversies. At the end of May, there was a controversy surrounding the waifu holocaust regarding sexual content and the availability of it on Steam. Shortly afterwards, another controversy arose when a game called Active Shooter, which allowed players to take the role of an active shooter inside of a school or the SWAT member trying to stop them, was pulled after it hurt people's feelings. I'll do a separate video on that later on after this one. Regardless about how you feel about either of these decisions that have been made by Steam, Steam feels that it is time for them to finally clarify their stance in the midst of these controversies as to what they should and shouldn't allow on their platform. What position should they take on censorship? What position should they take in the curation and availability of content? On the 6th of June, Valve made their decision. In a blog post titled, "Who Gets to Be on the Steam Store?", Valve took the side of free speech and consumer choice, deciding that they would not restrict content if it was deemed offensive or if it hurt people's fifis. In the blog post, Steam states that if you're a player, we shouldn't be choosing for you what content you can or can't buy. If you're a developer, we shouldn't be choosing what content you're allowed to create. These choices should be yours to make. Our role should be to provide systems and tools to support your efforts to make these choices for yourself, and to help you do it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. So as long as the products are functional, and as long as they're not straight up trolling, and as long as they're not illegal, they will be allowed on the Steam Store. Valve is making an obviously pro-consumer and libertarian move in what they allow in the store. This allows, of course, for consumers to have more control now over what kind of games and products they want to buy. If people don't want to buy it, they don't have to buy it. If people don't want to even see it, then they don't have to see it. But if you do want to buy something that's considered offensive, and everything these days is considered offensive to somebody, then you have that ability. Steam is not going to put themselves in the business or in the position of being the ones to tell you what you can and cannot buy. And as gamers practically everywhere rejoice at the fact that now they themselves personally have more control over what they buy, of course, social justice warriors and games journalists hate it. Internet soy boys, social justice warriors, and authoritarians all over the internet are lamenting the idea that, oh no, now Valve isn't telling us, a corporation isn't telling us what should and shouldn't be available for purchase. It's hard to believe that in 2018, it's the far left who are the ones who are telling us that these should be the decisions of corporations to make, and they're the ones with the moral responsibility to make sure things should be censored that they don't like. And nowadays, there's always something objectable about everything. Adam Rosenberg on Mashable says that Valve's video game marketplace Steam is now the anti-App Store, saying that Steam is fine with selling hateful content. Our focus is more on letting you remain ignorant to the existence of whatever you find offensive, even if it's objectively problematic to all rational sensibilities. IGN says that banning a game from Steam isn't smothering creative freedom, and Valve should stop acting like Steam is the only place to buy PC games. Of course, Kotaku couldn't let this go by without putting out their own anti-consumer opinion. Steam's irresponsible hands-off policy is proof that Valve still hasn't learned its lesson, says Nathan Grayson. Nadia Oxford on US Gamer, Steam's half-assed approach to content moderation will continue to antagonize indie developers. Steam doesn't have to moderate its storefront, but indies are no longer lacking for decent alternatives. And Polygon, of course, with Ben Kuchera telling us that Valve is giving up on responsibility. And listen, Ben, that article, it's fucking dog shit. Awful. Absolute garbage. But what I find so interesting is that it was in March of this year when you were rushing to the defense of violent video games, saying, it's okay if you love video games. I love violent video games. And you see, I'm Ben Kuchera, and I'm going to be the moral arbiter of what is and isn't acceptable, and I demand that Steam do the same based on my sensibilities. But violence in video games is okay. After all, I love it, and that means it's okay for you to love it too. I think that's why it's so very interesting that I went over this March article of yours about how violent video games are fine and there's nothing wrong with them. How I found little bits and pieces like, where you say, "I certainly don't want to be forced to back away from my enjoyment of these games due to a shady bit of political theater linking games to real-world tragedy." In your article you write, "Can games go too far?" Absolutely, but it's easy to check ratings, reviews, and videos to see if a game is right for you. Should children be playing violent video games? Every parent handles the situation differently, and it depends on the age and maturity of each child. But in my experience, the parents who work in this business or cover it for a living are more conservative with what they let their kids play. And again, we have a well-enforced ratings that give you a good idea of what kind of content is in each game. You even write that being critical or thoughtful about violence in games, even as you enjoy violent games, isn't a contradiction, it's being an adult. Oh, Ben, how quick you are to say that the consumers can take care of themselves and that it's up to them to decide what kind of content that they enjoy, so long as it's a violent bit of content, because of course, people are fine with violent content. After all, Ben likes violent content, and that makes it okay. But all of a sudden, when Steam decides that because a game promotes a certain message, or because a game has a certain ideology, or a certain social or political message that it wants to convey, all of a sudden, consumers completely lose their ability to make individual choices about what is and isn't appropriate for them. All of a sudden, when it's something that really rustles Ben's and the rest of gaming journalism's jimmies, all of a sudden, that consumer becomes totally incompetent and unable to make informed decisions, and we must leave it to a corporation, of all things, to make those decisions for us. Games journalism, ladies and gentlemen. This is why few take it seriously. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. While most people might tell themselves that they'll be the ones to decide what's hateful and offensive to them and whether or not they want to buy it, oddly enough, it's the games journalists, the ones who should be standing up for the consumer, telling us that it should be Valve's job to decide for us what is hateful and offensive. This obviously will end in disaster, because these are the same people who say things like Patrick Klepek over at Waypoint, who says that Agony, you know, the game about going into the pits of hell, it's dehumanizing women. It's about dehumanizing women, and it isn't just bad, it's toxic. Hey, remember Kingdom Come Deliverance and how every soy boy and social justice wannabe told us that it was a racist piece of garbage because the game that took place in medieval Bohemia didn't have enough black people in it? Well, Lucia Taylor is here from newnormative.com to tell you that that game is racist, and if you're a fan of it, you're a racist too. And you'd better not say anything because Lucia is a strong independent they, and they don't need no man. And of course, remember how Luke Plunkett on Kotaku told us that, well, those darn white people in this racist game. Remember Far Cry 5? Well, that was so apolitical and inoffensive that, of course, that makes it offensive. Are you excited for Detroit Become Human? Well, fuck you! The game apparently treats women like shit, and that means it's misogynist. And it would be very irresponsible for any storefront of games to sell a misogynist game. Dia Lucina is here from Waypoint once again to let us know that in God of War, moms come last, and the role of the mother is to be invisible or toxic. Sounds really misogynist to me. And we can't have storefronts selling misogynist games. After all, they have a responsibility. Oh, no, of course The Witcher 3 isn't safe, because Tariq Musa, to which everything must be related to race in some way, is here to tell us about the race problem in games. I'm sure he has many wise words for us about white fragility. You get my point? You buying what I'm selling? You picking up what I'm laying down? The examples are practically endless. I am hoping you're getting the idea, but I'll elaborate just in case. The same people who are telling us that Valve has a moral responsibility or whatever to curate the kind of content that's on Steam because it could be offensive or problematic or there's some issue with its message. These are the people who will go out of their way to find problems with almost everything.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
These are the people who want to dictate the kind of things that can and should be sold by Steam, and Steam is saying that no, we're leaving it up to the consumers to decide what they want to buy and what they want to see. Everything is offensive to somebody. Everything will make somebody out there mad. Any kind of game, any kind of media that has a political, social, any message of any kind is not going to sit well with everybody. So, as a result, instead of us trying to be the moral arbiters of what is and isn't acceptable, we are going to allow the consumers to make that decision as individuals. And the people who do not want that are the people who want to have control over the things that you consume because they have a problem with it personally. That's why Ben Kuchera is fine with you being the one to decide whether or not a violent video game is okay for you. After all, Ben loves violent video games, but all of a sudden, if it's about a political or social message, or there might be a religious theme to it, or some other bit of commentary that isn't, well, party approved, Ben doesn't think that you're so competent anymore. You'd better let Valve do the thinking for you. And again, of those that we should expect the most, we once again see the least. Jim Sterling, who historically has taken some pro-consumer stances, decides that now is time to part with tradition, I suppose. In a video entitled Valve Endorses AIDS Simulator, Jim Sterling makes the statement that Valve need to grow up and accept that you're responsible for and inevitably endorse the things you sell on your store, which is fucking retarded. You can go to Amazon.com and you can buy however many copies of Mein Kampf you wish. By Jim's logic, Amazon the company, is endorsing and openly supports Adolf Hitler and Nazi ideology. Walmart Incorporated sells the Quran, which means that they openly endorse and support the teachings of the warlord pedophile Prophet Muhammad. And everything that is said in the book and contained within the book is openly supported and endorsed by Walmart, because after all, they are selling the book. As to those who reject faith, I will punish them with terrible agony in this world and in the hereafter, nor will they have anyone to help. This message brought to you by Walmart. Save money, live better. Mein Kampf, the Quran, these are both very terrible books. They're full of violence and awful thoughts and bigotry and xenophobia and cruelty, pedophilia. Because to Jim Sterling, if you sell these books, you're either a Muslim or you're a Nazi. The idea that you unironically believe that by selling something, you openly support it and endorse it is, it's beyond me, and I guess I should just stop expecting better. Remember when Grand Theft Auto 5 was coming out and there was the Target petition by women and feminists who wanted the game pulled from stores because it, encouraged violence against women? Yeah, well, that petition worked. It passed. It got pulled from a number of stores. The moral outrage and panic of other people meant that it was denying other people's ability to buy it at a storefront. Now on Destructoid, your review of the game was that it was a 9 out of 10 game. It was superb. A hallmark of excellence, you said. But in December of 2014, you, on your YouTube channel in Grand Theft Australia, you say you disagreed with Target pulling the game. Well, you know what, Jim? That's just too bad, because after all, it offended somebody, and we don't want Target supporting and endorsing all of the things that you can do in Grand Theft Auto, a game that's full of terrible, horrible things done to completely innocent people. After all, it's Target's moral responsibility to make sure that they don't put out anything available to the consumer that is offensive, that is questionable in its content. We should let Target be the ones to decide, not the consumer. But hey, none of that matters because you were able, Jim, to go out and find a game called AIDS Simulator, a game that nobody would have noticed, that nobody has seen, that would never have gotten any attention, and would have obviously faded into the annals of obscurity. The whole point that, oh, now we're going to have games like AIDS Simulator out there, odd because the game has been pulled because it does not meet the criteria for Steam. It's a troll game or an asset flip or something similar. There have been terrible games, and there will be terrible games that are available on Steam, and even on platforms like consoles and physical storefronts. There will always be terrible games that are sold. The objective should not be to censor even more. The objective should be to let users, to let consumers make responsible decisions. The key is not to say, Valve, some bad games might be released. Some unsavory games might be released. So, we shouldn't let the consumers be the ones who ultimately decide. That should be you. Quite frankly, I couldn't give two shits if a game called AIDS Simulator was somewhere on the Steam marketplace in some forgotten, long, dusty corner where nobody would notice it and nobody would see it, and the only times that it would be played would be for memes and lols at how terrible and stupid it was. I will happily accept the existence of games like AIDS Simulator if it means that I'm not restricted from buying the games that other people don't think that I should be able to buy. And as somebody who touts themselves as a pro-consumer individual, I'm kind of surprised that you took this position. But then again, maybe I should just stop expecting better of games journalism. Terrible, horrible games, asset flips, anything that makes its way through the cracks, let it be there. Let consumers reject them. People have the ability to make informed decisions on what is and isn't a good product that lives up to their hard-earned money. Jim, you might not have any faith in the consumer, but I do. And unlike you, I will side with them. But it's not just Jim Sterling. It's everyone at Polygon and Kotaku and Waypoint and all of these games journalism sites who are once again completely out of touch with what is wanted by the community. Let's take a look at PCGamer. Oftentimes, whenever I read PCGamer, I get the impression as if they're not satisfied playing second fiddle to the more iconic leftist video game journalism sites like Kotaku and Waypoint and Polygon, and sometimes they want to give it a spin for themselves, give those guys up at the top a run for their money. This article by Tyler Wilde, who, by the way, Tyler Wilde, if you don't remember the name, let me jog your memory. Years back, he was the one who wrote the article talking about how we should stop calling ourselves the PC master race because, well, it can offend someone's feelings because Nazis. Tyler is the typical oversensitive video game journalist who has to go out and try to find things that are offensive to write his articles about. And in his article here, Steam's new anything goes policy is doomed from the start, where he says Valve is responsible for the games published on Steam, even if it says it isn't. He says flat out that as the largest PC games distributor, Valve has a responsibility regarding what it chooses to sell and what it chooses not to. Because video game journalists do not believe that the responsibility of buying decisions should be made by the consumer. No, they should be made by a corporation. And the bigger and more powerful the corporation is, the more moral responsibility they have to control the kinds of things that you can consume. It's like an episode out of the Twilight Zone. What's happened to the left exactly? He says that Valve finally reaches the destination it's been heading toward for the past decade or so. Rather than make one group mad by keeping an objectionable game off Steam, it'll make everybody mad by allowing absolutely everything on Steam. And ultimately, this results from a fundamental misunderstanding by Tyler of what the position is of people who don't share his position. There are people like me, for instance, who are extremely happy, and in fact, most gamers that I've noticed seem to be rather thrilled that Valve isn't doing this censorship for them. But our position isn't that we're mad because Valve decides to sell some games that we don't think should be sold. That's never been our position. Tyler is projecting his own attitude and emotional connection to these kinds of issues onto other people and assuming that they feel the same way that he does. If Steam wants to sell a game that I find objectionable or questionable, I'm not angry and I'm not upset. I just won't buy it. And that'll be that. Because I should be the one making those kinds of decisions for myself. If I don't want it, I won't buy it. He assumes that because he gets angry and upset like a child whenever he doesn't get his way because other people aren't kowtowing to his demands, that the other side behaves the same way. And that's simply not the case. And maybe this is a result of Valve understanding that you can't make these people happy. They will never ever be satisfied. Nothing that you do will make them happy. You can give an inch, and they'll want a foot, and then they'll want a yard, and then a mile. There's no satisfying these people, and there's nothing that you can do to get into their precious good graces. No amount of changes and apologies will ever do yourself justice. Tyler says the first of many problems with this policy is that Valve has, for the first time that I can recall, said explicitly here that it does not care who is mad. To Valve, one person or group's anger is exactly equal to any other's, and everything people get angry about is simply a sign for controversy. Consider this baffling paragraph. Well, Tyler, let me elucidate for you. There is one side that's always mad. Social justice warriors. The regressive left. They're always mad about something. They're always mad, and they can never be brought out of their ire. They are always going to find something objectionable. They're always going to find something to clutch their pearls at and be the moral arbiters of what everyone else is and isn't allowed to have. And if you like things they don't like, then you're a bad person. This is probably Valve saying that one side of the two can be satisfied and the other never ever will. Because they're always pushing and they're always looking for things to be mad about. This is Valve simply saying that they're not going to be in the business of regulating or attempting to make their storefront conform to whatever your feelings personally like the best. This is them saying that you're an adult, if you don't like something, don't buy it. It's not our business to try and censor and control what you can and cannot buy. And this is this libertarian and liberal position to a marketplace that you would expect for the left to want the most. But these people want to control what you do, and as a result, they're not happy with Valve. So Tyler quotes from the official Steam blog post here and says, "The challenge is that this problem is not simply about whether or not the Steam store should contain games with adult or violent content. Instead, it's about whether the store contains games with an entire range of controversial topics, politics, sexuality, racism, gender, violence, identity, and so on. In addition, there are controversial topics that are particular to games, like what even constitutes a game or what level of quality is appropriate before something can be released." Tyler's problem is that racism is apparently defined not as bad, but as a controversial topic, which is weird because most of us would probably agree that discussions about race and racisms are indeed controversial topics, especially in the day and age where historically accurate games are racist, and you're racist for liking it. Hell, you're racist because you're white. In an environment that is constantly telling us that we're racist for the tiniest little meaningless things, the most benign and innocent actions and things that we say make us racist, then of course, Valve would probably have a contention with outright labeling racism as X, Y, or Z. And it's probably why they're also not too thrilled to try and be the ones to regulate it. Because everything is racist these days. It's a word, much like Nazi, that has simply lost its power. No one believes these people anymore when they say racist. Social justice warriors and video game journalists on the internet need to reacquaint themselves with the story of the boy who cried wolf. Though they'll probably say it's racist against wolves, but, whatever. People clearly have very different ideas of what constitutes something that's legitimately racist. And so Valve doesn't want to put themselves in the positions where they're the arbiter of what is and isn't racist. Instead, what they're saying is, you as the consumer get to decide. And maybe there is a racist game that comes out. Sure, in fact, I expect there to be racist games that come out. And you know what? You don't have to buy them and you don't have to support them. Tyler is angry because Valve is not taking the exact position that he is taking. And Tyler is someone whose position is we shouldn't be saying the PC master race. Because Nazis. It seems that Tyler Wilde and Jim Sterling are on the same page here, which doesn't shock me at all, when he writes, "This idea is also easily exposed as bogus," referring to Steam saying that it will not be a reflection of Valve's values just to have it on the store. Frame it like this, Tyler says. Steam is not a racist platform, but it will host racist games, promote them, and take a cut from their sales. How can Valve say that promoting and profiting from a game doesn't reflect its values? It's a value judgment to allow this to happen in the first place. Well, Tyler, I'll explain this to you just like I apparently have to explain this to Jim Sterling. Walmart is not Muslim because they sell the Quran. Target is not Christian because they sell the Bible. Amazon are not fascists because they sell Mein Kampf. They're not communists because they sell the Communist Manifesto. If you think they are, then that says far more about you than it says about them. Let's look at it this way. If your problem is that they're promoting and profiting from these kinds of things, and that means that they're super duper bad because of it, well, alright, let's compromise. They can still sell it, but it's free. Mein Kampf no longer costs anything. The Communist Manifesto doesn't even cost anything now. If your problem is that they're profiting off of this hateful, hateful material, then you should obviously have no problem if they just start giving it away to whoever they want for free. But, as Valve said, as long as it works, as long as it's not a troll game, and as long as it's not illegal, then Valve is going to let the consumers be the one to decide. Decide whether it's right for them, or whether it's not right for them. And, today, with all the reviewers on YouTube and across the internet, and with all of the tools that are available on the Steam site itself, people definitely have the ability to make informed buying decisions. And you shouldn't try and take that away from them, you authoritarian fuck. Who decides what anime games are, Tyler asks. There are other problems with Valve's proposal. For starters, the company says that trolling will not be permitted on Steam, even after this policy changes take place. You can bet the developers are going to test that claim in creative ways. And what constitutes trolling? Making low-quality games? Making parody games? Discerning between parody and malice requires some interpretation of a developer's intent, which, being impossible, only allows Valve to make more value judgments while pretending not to. Tyler's first point here is that there will be developers who will test the rules. Yeah. That's just the nature of rules, Tyler. Welcome to the real world. People will always test the rules. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever make rules. Dear Lord. Hell, if this pushes developers to try and get really creative, then go for it. Fine. Doesn't bother me a lick. And I'll lick anything. For the rest of the paragraph, Tyler says that Valve has to decide what is and isn't trolling, and they get to determine if a game should be allowed on Steam if it's one of the troll games. If it's just a cash grab, or if it's just a asset flip, something along those lines. These are completely different from games being restricted on the platform because they have a certain message, or because the developer has a certain political or social view. These refer to the functionality of games, not their message and not their content. In Tyler, Valve isn't saying that they're no longer making any decisions about anything, because of course, because not literally everything will be available on Steam, there is some level of discretion that Valve is going to have to take when they make these decisions. That doesn't mean you could throw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater and say, well, since Valve has to make some decisions, it's pointless for them to not make decisions in other areas. Valve will, of course, allow a certain level of quality control to be maintained. Though admittedly that has been a problem that Valve's been struggling with in the past, though for me, someone who's been using Steam for years and years now, I've never had much of a problem with being able to determine whether or not a game was useless, worthless shovelware. Maybe that's a problem that people like Jim Sterling have all the time because they go out and look for these games, but it certainly doesn't seem to be a problem with me or people I know or asked. Either way, it seems like it's a small price to pay. In the Steam blog, Valve did outline some ideas that they had for proposed filtering tools that would allow the gaming community at large to be the ones to add tags to games to make sure that they're the most appropriately labeled. Tyler says, the proposed filtering tools also sound like they might be flawed in some way that Steam's existing tagging system is. Valve suggests that an individual user could decide to filter out anime games. But who decides what is or isn't an anime game? Certainly not Valve, as it doesn't want to decide anything. Fuck off, Tyler. This is the disingenuous nature of video game journalism constantly being thrust out there into your face. It's not even hidden, and it's not subtle. Again, Tyler apparently is under the impression that Valve doesn't want to make any decisions whatsoever, not regarding quality control, not regarding the troll games on Steam, not regarding any of the rules that they have outlined still exist for games to be on Steam. No, Tyler has simply taken the position that they're not banning games that I don't find offensive, so that means Valve is saying they don't want to decide anything. Tyler writes, so is it the developer? If I were a developer whose game contained characters in a style that could be described as anime, say Ni no Kuni 2, I would not want my game to be invisible to part of Steam's audience. Say I filter out Steam games categorized as memes, a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Going by popular tags, I would not see Vampire. PUBG is tagged as a stealth game in a simulation. In GTA 5 is a racing game, apparently. Well, of course it's a fucking racing game, you retard. Have you ever played Grand Theft Auto 5? Why, Tyler? Why would you take contention with Grand Theft Auto 5 being a racing game? Why, how could that possibly be a contentious tagging issue? Ugh. He says offering filters will be a messy solution at best. But you know, Tyler, that's what happens when you decide as a consumer to filter out things from your discoverability. Every time that you decide that you're going to filter something, anything in your life, then you run the risk of missing out on something that you might consider really excellent. Every time you decide that everything of this genre shouldn't pop up for you, you might miss the proverbial diamond in the rough. That's part of the risk of picking and choosing in generalized terms. And you know what, Tyler? That's totally on you. That's your call. That was your decision to make. Instead of writing knee-jerk reaction articles for left-leaning gaming websites, maybe you should stop and breathe for 5 minutes and not think that the sky is falling, and maybe wait and see how these sorts of systems that Valve wants to implement actually play out. Do I think they'll work perfectly? No, of course not, and nobody does. Steam does have a history of kind of, fucking things up. But regardless, you've already decided that it's going to be absolutely terrible and it's not going to work in any way. And even if that was the case, again, why are you filtering out things and then having those things filtered out for you? You don't seem to think that Grand Theft Auto 5 is a racing game. So, pardon me if my faith in your ability to tag games based on genre and content is a little lacking. This also assumes that gamers really rely heavily on Steam's tagging system to find games for themselves, instead of going by friend recommendations and the top sellers and the best sellers, internet searches for top 10s of genres and styles. And then Tyler says, well, itch.io has a similar anything goes policy to Steam, but they don't like Steam's proposal policy, and they want you to keep your malicious, derogatory, discriminatory, bullying, harassing, demeaning content off itch.io. He said his ban buttons are ready there. Okay, I won't be buying from them then, because anything can be considered any of those things by anybody, and I am an adult, thank you very much. I'll decide what content I can and cannot consume. So, this was a good job, Tyler. This made me not want to ever go to itch.io. And Tyler, don't worry, Valve said that if developers abuse the tagging system and are disingenuous with it, they will be banned. So, the sky isn't falling. Relax. Just go back to whinging that a company is selling things that you might not find personally appealing. His next section in Tyler's article is making people mad. Valve is correct that, if it sets content policies and enforces them, it's always going to make someone mad. I'd be mad if it rejected a game I think deserves to be on Steam, and mad again if it permitted something else that I think deserves to be shot into the sun. I have said before that I want Valve to state its policies explicitly, and it has done that, and yet I still criticize it. You can't really win. Yeah, that sounds more like a personal problem, Tyler. Not a Steam problem. That one's on you, buddy. Me personally, Rags personally, speaking out of my own doggo mouth, I would be upset if the rules were not applied fairly across multiple games. I wouldn't be upset, really, if something wasn't allowed and another thing allowed because of the individual content of them. I would be upset because the rules weren't being applied fairly. But Tyler says the solution is not to have no standards whatsoever, to pretend that nothing is bad or good, but that it's all simply controversial content. No, some things are bad, even if I don't trust Valve to decide what is or isn't bad, and even less after this decision. I really don't trust anyone who refuses to make any distinction in the first place, and takes no responsibility for the things it promotes. What's interesting about this point that Tyler makes is that it kinda proves the point of people who are in support of the Steam decision. Tyler goes on and on and on about what should I trust Valve to do, and I don't trust Valve to do this, and I don't trust Valve to do that. That's the point, Tyler. You shouldn't have to trust Valve to make content available to you based on its, well, message, based on its content. You don't trust Steam. I don't trust anybody else but myself in determining what I am and am not able to handle and what I am and am not going to enjoy. I will make the purchasing decisions for myself. Thank you very much. I am an adult, and allegedly you are too, Tyler. You should be in love with this new blog post and this new Steam decision, because if you don't trust Valve, no matter what they do, then don't trust Valve. And make the decisions for yourself. You trust yourself, don't you? I trust myself. Tyler, again, disingenuously states that Valve's solution is to not have any standards whatsoever, when if he had read the blog post, which at this point I doubt he actually has, and he just read Polygon's take on it, they do have standards. There are rules to what can and will not be made public on Steam. It's just that now they might sell things that you find questionable in terms of content. And so what you're going to do is you're going to be hyperbolic and say, oh, well, now there's no rules at all. He then quotes Rock Paper Shotgun editor Graham Smith, saying that Steam isn't just a store, it's a community of hundreds of millions of people, many of them young and impressionable. Analogies to smaller digital stores, bookshops, etc. don't work because those don't have teenagers hanging out on or in them all day. Won't you think of the children? Won't you think of all of those young, impressionable minds that Steam has a moral responsibility to protect from the evil, cruel outside world? It is Steam's moral responsibility to do the parenting, and things should be restricted from adults and consumers who can make choices because, well, maybe out there somewhere, a poor, young, impressionable child will see something. I assume that this quote is supposed to support I don't even know. You know what, let's just play it safe. We're not going to allow Doom or The Witcher 3 on Steam anymore. After all, there are a lot of young and impressionable people out there, so we can't be letting these mature-rated games, you know, just out and about for public purchase. That would be irresponsible. Shut the fuck up, Graham Smith. Game journos quoting other game journos. Wow, that'll convince me. You've won me over there. This policy proposal suggests that Valve really doesn't want to run this community, even though it's the only one who can because it owns it. Valve wants Steam to be viewed as a public utility while still privately owning and profiting from it. That is simply not possible, because making a profit from your company is bad, I guess. In any event, how about I don't want another person to run the community that I have? Yes, it's on Steam, but it's my community. I don't want Valve policing the things that I do and the things that I say in my own community. I have the ability to do that myself, and I don't need a corporation's help in determining what is and isn't acceptable behavior. Now, they have the right to, of course, but I don't want them to. And the things that other communities do and say, as long as they're not illegal, and as long as they're not breaking any laws, that's fine with me. They can say whatever they want. I take the free speech position to such matters. I do not see myself in the shoes of Tyler Wilde and Ben Kuchera and all of these other video game journalists who see themselves as the moral arbiters who are the ones who shall decide what you are and are not allowed to do and say and consume. He ends the article by saying, to put down a doormat for the worst grifters, spammers, asset flippers, sexists, and racists is irresponsible. And if Valve follows through with this half-baked plan instead of doing even the bare minimum of ideological and financial legwork to set basic standards, it will end up implicitly endorsing the worst in our culture, as it is already starting to. And to make sure, well, let's talk about this so far. I have no doubt that there will be racist games on Steam. Just like I have no doubt that there are racist books in libraries. Just like I have no doubt there are racist pieces of music in, I don't know, iTunes, wherever kids get their music these days. I have no doubt that there will be sexist games, and I have no doubt there will be misogynist games, blah, blah, blah. But If I come across them and they are unsavory to me, then what I will do is I will not purchase them. Maybe I do want to buy a racist game. Maybe I do. And it shouldn't be anyone else's decision but my own if I want to do that. I don't see myself getting any racist games or sexist games or whatever. But that's not your decision to make. That's mine. I'm the consumer. I'm the one spending money, and I'm the one who will decide what I will play. And remember, Tyler, you're the one who is going out of his way to find things offensive. We can't say PC Master Race anymore. I'm not exactly ready to give people like you the ability to decide what is and isn't going to be allowed. Stop trying to control me. Stop trying to control other people, because you cannot love someone and control them at the same time. People have to have the freedom to make these decisions for themselves, as adults. Especially in a day and age where everything is considered sexist for whatever reason, and everything is considered racist or misogynist for whatever reason, and I don't buy it for a single second. If you, Tyler, come across a racist game, then you know what you can do. You cannot buy it, and you can ignore it, and you can go on with your life, just like the rest of humanity's been doing. In any event, he says, and to make sure the Drek, which means rubbish, is invisible to those who don't want to see it, Valve risks hiding things they do want to see. Well, that's just the nature of any tagging system, isn't it, Tyler? If you say, don't show me X, then you might miss things that are tagged as X. I don't listen to much rap music, but there are some great rap songs that I enjoy. However, by and large, I don't want to hear rap music. And I accept that if I completely cut myself off from rap music, and I don't want to look at it and listen to it and see it, then yes, I will miss the good rap songs. I accept that responsibility as a result of my personal decisions, Tyler. You know what, Tyler? Maybe that would be a good idea for you. Maybe you should learn about personal responsibility, and then maybe apply it to the articles that you write in the future. One thing I did find interesting about this article, though, is how the featured comment is, of course, another mod's defending Tyler. Interesting because basically all of the comments are completely ringing Tyler out for his ridiculous article. Again, the immense disconnect between, gamers and games journalists. Oh shit, the comments are really ringing us over the coals over this one. We better feature the comment of another mod who is actually defending Tyler. Given the racist example, there is no hard and fast line as to what constitutes racism. People want to shift the goalposts all the time. One recent example, some people in a certain influential industry in games, namely PC gaming, yours, decided that they were going to make a big deal out of Kingdom Come Deliverance being racist. You are saying that you games journalists should be able to veto games on the grounds of racism because some of you have a problem with one of the developers? Let's make things perfectly clear. I don't trust you or Valve or anyone else to decide what constitutes racism or sexist content. I have seen too many people, including people who write for this very website, twist those concepts into meaninglessness for the purposes of virtue signaling or political grandstanding. Good on you, Steam. Free and open markets should decide what makes money, not some curator. How did "we'll stop banning visual novels, sorry guys" turn into "we are going to openly support racism and sexism"? To say you are reaching here is putting it mildly, PCGamer. And no, I won't shed a single tear that a company has chosen to opt out of censorship, even if it means I have to come to terms with the fact that not everyone adheres to my worldview. As a functioning adult, I think I'll survive. You can't have it both ways, PCGamer. Steam already has curators that people can follow, and other gamers can apply their own tags that you can filter out if you so choose. And I don't want Steam to be mommy or daddy telling grown adults what they can and cannot play. Valve censors things I like. Valve needs to stop censoring stuff. Valve stops censoring things I don't like. Valve needs to censor stuff. PCGamer in a nutshell. Oh, come on, be an adult. Don't you have a brain to choose the right game for you? You vote with your wallets at the end of the day. This market needs to grow up finally. There should be a space for rated R content and controversial stuff too. We call it freedom. You are so sensitive about racism and political correctness that you can't think clearly. Let people make, sell, and buy the games they want to. We need laws, not censorship. Games are art. I hate games that involve racism and bigotry. But I don't want them to be banned from any site. It's important people see things like that to know what's wrong, and it's important that they have to shut down in a correct way, with no one paying them a second glance. I think you get the idea of the general attitude in the PCGamer comments section, and how completely detached the writers there and the mods there seem to be with the general gaming population. I was telling my parents about this the other day, and it's kind of interesting to talk about this stuff from the perspective of a person who isn't really involved in video games and doesn't know much about it. And I was telling him that there's this odd split between the people who we should trust in the industry, the journalists who are supposed to represent the consumers, and the consumers themselves. There's this odd split. And what they said was that kind of reminds us about the mainstream media, how there's this huge split between what the news media says and does and what the general average person thinks and trusts. People like Jim Sterling and PCGamer and Polygon and Kotaku and Waypoint and all of these publications once again had an opportunity to take a pro-consumer argument. They had the chance to get back in the good graces of gamers everywhere, and of course they didn't. Their ideology was far more important. We have to be controlling. We have to be authoritarian on these issues. We can't allow the people that we're supposed to be advocating for make decisions. By Steam taking a free speech and anti-censorship position, yeah, maybe there will be racist games. Maybe there will be sexist games. Maybe there will be troll games of every kind and color that are imaginable. And you know what? Fine. So be it. So be it. I'm fine with that. If somebody wants to make a racist game, then let them make a racist game. It's not me to tell them that they aren't allowed to do it, and they aren't allowed to sell that product. If there's a market for it, then there's a market for it. I'm not going to buy it, and I'm not going to support it, and I think that it's rather distasteful. But, just because I find something distasteful, doesn't mean that that gives me any right to tell other people that they aren't allowed to enjoy it for whatever reason. This is finger-wagging moral superiority from people who should be advocating for us, not trying to control us. And it's strange how some like Ben Kuchera can trust the general consumer to buy violent video games, but when it comes to controversial content relating to, racism, sexism, all that stuff, all of a sudden we need to have mommy and daddy, Valve, telling us what we are and are not allowed to play, purchase, and see there. I, Rags, believe in the consumer. I think that you should have the right to buy whatever you wish to buy. And I think that you have the capability of determining for yourself what is going to be a good product for you. Steam has taken a pro-free speech position, one that I appreciate, and one that I fully, totally support. Because I believe in the consumer, far more than I believe in a corporation to decide what's best for you. Well, those are my thoughts on the Steam blog and their positions on free speech. If you like this video and wish to support me in whatever way you can, well, you can keep watching my other content, or if you're a really good boy, then you could donate to me on Patreon, just a little bit. If it's what you can give, helps me out a great deal. I make my entire living making videos here on YouTube, and it's generous audience members like you and patrons who help keep me going. Leave your comments down below and tell me what you think, and have a lovely day.